Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 17.4 has been out for a few days, and there's even more features and changes to talk about since the iOS 17.4 is out. What's new video? We'll talk about that as well as the overall experience. I've been using it full time on my iPhone 15 Pro Max and iPad Pro. We'll also talk about your experience based off the YouTube community poll, where there's an incredible 28,000 votes and 415 comments. I've read every single comment to determine what the update is like, and also what percentage of people say that battery life is better. We'll take a look at that a little bit later, along with some of your comments. But first, let's talk about a little bit of Apple news. And the first thing has to do with Apple allowing iPhone users in the EU deleting Safari. Now that we have sideloading and certain compliances Apple has to make, and this is a paper that Apple pushed out that says Apple's non-confidential summary of DMA compliance report. Within here, it details that you'll be able to soon remove Safari if you want to do that, and they'll also make it easier to switch to Android if you want to do that. So it's a pretty lengthy paper. I'll link it in the description if you want to check it out, but maybe that will come soon with an over-the-air push, or it will be an update such as iOS 17.5 or something else. To go along with this week's releases, PayPal and Venmo can now be used for tap to pay in the United States. That's now live if you have a business profile, so that's something that was announced this week as well. Apple is also launching a new store in China, and when they do that, they provide a new wallpaper. So you can see it says it's opening soon. It says, "Hello, good. It's a good time for flowers to bloom. Looking forward to meeting you." And it says where the actual store will be in Shanghai. So this is available here. I'll link this in the description, and you also have this new wallpaper to go along with it. So that's directly from Apple. Also, Epic Games this week was planning to make a third-party app store, but then Apple banned them as far as a developer account goes, and then reinstated them. So now they've been reinstated, and that means that there'll be more third-party apps and probably Fortnite on the iPhone, at least in the EU. Now, in the EU, if you have a third-party app store, they actually won't work when you're traveling outside the European Union. Apple says they'll give you a grace period, but then it will actually deactivate. So it's using GPS to determine where you are, and if you travel outside the EU, maybe to the United States or maybe the UK, it will actually just turn off altogether, depending on how long you're there. So I don't know that they're going to be bringing this to the United States anytime soon. Now, with iOS 17.4, one of the features I couldn't show because I'm not in the EU is the EU onboarding screens for apps and web browsers. I saved some in my photos, so when you go to actually set up your phone after you've installed iOS 17.4, you'll be presented with About Your Browser. Then you'll have the option to choose your default browser from any list of some that you've heard of, some that you may not have heard of, and just whatever you want to use. You can select as your default browser now in the EU. Also, there's a similar screen for apps, and also that app screen that comes up in the EU. So, for example, when you go to download an app, there was a little splash screen that says App Store would like to install an app. Supposedly, Apple was going to fix this, and they haven't. It still pops up, so it's sort of a feature if you're installing from maybe Spotlight Search or directly from the App Store and you're in the EU, you'll actually see this. Now, if we go into music, there's actually a change here I didn't mention. So if we go into music and maybe we'll just play a song, we'll swipe home to the dynamic island. And when we actually switch tracks, it will have a different animation. So if we switch here, you'll see it flips around the actual album art and just sort of fades into it instead of just jumping. So there's a nice little animation there that's been updated. Also, Apple Music Classical has been updated. And this is a small update. Let me close this here. We'll just close out of this. We'll go to Apple Music Classical. And within Apple Music Classical, if you updated it, we'll just tap continue. It will now say home in the bottom left. So again, it's unifying everything across the OS. Now we have it in music, Apple Music Classical, books, as well as TV, podcasts, and others. So that's a great update. Very simple, but I'm glad to see some consistency across the OS. Something else that appears to be new that I'm not sure many people are aware of is if we go into Notes, and if you use your Notes to actually scan a document, so you want to scan a document into your Notes, now it will let you scan more than 11 pages. Before it had a limit. Also, one thing I didn't mention in the initial What's New video is with those new settings in Siri. So if we go into Siri and Search, within Siri and Search, where we can use the word hey in front of it, that now works in German, but it also works in French and Spanish. So that's something I didn't mention before. So if you want to use any one of these or turn it off altogether with Siri or saying the word hey in front of it, you can now do that. Also, another update has to do with Apple Wallet. Apple Wallet can now allow for real-time Apple Card, Apple savings, and also Apple Cash apps to integrate with it to sort of see your overall budget and then give you guidance on that. So different apps that are similar to what we had with Mint, such as Monarch, Copilot, and others have added Apple Card support, and you'll see this was posted on Mac Rumors. So you can now track that real-time information in third-party apps where before Apple didn't allow it. Also, there's a bunch of new splash screens. You'll see a music one here that's on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, the natural titanium one. There was also new splash screens for the App Store that says it's a safe and trusted place to discover amazing apps and games. There's other ones for the Apple TV app, as well as messages and more. So quite a few of them that may pop up from time to time if you're using these apps. Now, as far as releases this week, well, we've had a few that have been out for a while, such as the AirPods Pro 2 beta update I showed last week, but we got a ton of updates, and we'll talk about connectivity with those in a moment. We had watchOS 10.4 updates, visionOS 1.1, tvOS and HomePodOS 17.4, as well as macOS 14.4, older updates as well. macOS 12.7.4, macOS 13.6.5, iOS and iPadOS 15.8.2, as well as iOS and iPadOS 16.7.6. All of those have been available this past week, so lots of things that released this past week. Also, we have a Safari Technology Preview. And if we go to download Safari Technology Preview, you can see the latest version of 190 that released on March 6th. So all of those have been available this past week, along with the new MacBook Air M3 release that I did a video on the other day as well. We're expecting maybe some new iPads next week also, so maybe we'll see those OLED iPads, some new announcements from Apple. Hopefully we'll see that very, very soon. Now, as far as what's next, well, iOS 17.5 Beta 1 should be next, and I would expect that probably as soon as Tuesday or Wednesday of this coming week on the 12th or 13th of March. So most of the time we see that following the release, since we had sort of an odd release schedule this past week with it staggered throughout the week with iOS 17.4 earlier in the week and then others later in the week. It makes sense that we'll see it sometime next week with iOS 17.5, watchOS 10.5, and all of the other updates. We also could see an iOS 17.4.1 if Apple decides they need to patch some issues, as there are still some bugs that remain. Now, there were a bunch of removed features that we could see in iOS 17.5, such as the podcast widget, actually matching the color of the podcast itself. HomeOS mentions, again, maybe returning, as well as the Safari navigation bar, maybe expanding again. The clock stopwatch, live activity that we saw earlier on, all of those things could have just been pushed to the next version. The stopwatch doesn't have a live activity right now. So all of those things, along with SharePlay for HomePod and Apple TV, maybe we'll see that in 17.5. However, there is going to be some major updates with iOS 18. We keep hearing more and more about Siri getting smarter, generative AI being added, and a redesign of at least some of iOS 18. We know we're getting RCS support, as Apple has already mentioned that, but now we're hearing we're getting some new accessibility updates as well. So it looks like it's going to be very feature-packed once we get that, and of course we won't see that probably until June, under 90 days away at this point, but usually within the first week of June, we'll see those updates, and they should be pretty major this time around. Some people are saying it will be the biggest update since we've had iOS 7 or maybe iPhone OS 1, so we'll have to wait and see. Now, also, before we talk about bug fixes, I did want to mention security updates, as there's quite a few of them that I didn't mention in the What's New video, as Apple hadn't released them yet. So if we go to Apple's security website, so if we go into iOS 17.4 and iPadOS 17.4, there's quite a few of them. In fact, on the Mac side, there were over 50 of them, and there's tons of different fixes as far as security updates go. So lots of them where they could have caused issues from Safari, WebKit, and more, and things with the kernel, Siri, and more. So the impact an attacker with physical access may be able to use Siri to access sensitive user data. This issue was addressed through improved state management. That's a pretty major update, so it seems like this was a good one with a lot of different fixes here. And some of the bug fixes are, they fixed Wi-Fi. Pretty much everyone that was telling me had an issue before, they've realized that they either had an issue with their router, and also this past week, Eero pushed out an update if you're using an Eero router that specifically fixed Apple issues, but there are Wi-Fi fixes, it seems, and it looks to have resolved the issues for most people. Also, Remind Me in the Mail app is now working again, so that's great news. And of course, I've mentioned this, and this will be the last time unless it's not fixed again. It looks like the notification bug has been fixed finally. As far as bugs that are still remaining, well, the wallpaper fading bug is still there, so it sort of goes desaturated a little bit. So if I swipe home, you'll see it here on this wallpaper particularly. So it definitely desaturates. I've also seen squared off notifications, which are quite annoying. And also some people have reported resprings and crashes. That's a pretty major issue for some people. And another one that's kind of major is the home controls are not working for some people. So if we tap on a studio light, sometimes they just don't respond. Also, shortcuts are not working for others, and the magnifier is still missing. They didn't bring that back. That's not really a bug, but something I wanted to mention. When you're using markup, maybe that's in notes. For you using markup in notes, there's no magnifier here anymore. So it's a bit disappointing. They haven't brought it back. So maybe in a future update. Also, something else that's pretty major is if we go into the Photos app and go to a video, if we go into this Apple Vision Pro footage that I shot, you'll see as I move through this, it jumps around even though I'm just scrolling. It's not smooth at all. It's just sort of jumping all over the place. So this is a little bit of a bug we haven't seen before and definitely needs to be smoothed out. The playback is just super glitchy at this point, jumping all over the place. This is in any video that you try and scroll through. Also, the volume slider bug is still there for some people. I keep hearing that over and over where it just sort of jumps all over the place for some. And also some people were saying when they're taking photos, they get a black screen. So if maybe we bring this up, we snap a photo here, they were getting a black screen, or it just wasn't working altogether. So you'll see there, it sort of blanks out and lets you see it, but some people were saying it was just going completely black. Sometimes it was glitching out, and it seems to be good as far as the photos overall. And if you see any improvements, last week people complained of framing being off. I haven't seen that actually return, but here's some photos. You can see a couple from this week where it looks like it's doing a pretty good job. I don't really have any complaints with it, but I don't think we're going to see any improvements with it. Now, as far as the release notes, Now with the release notes on their public-facing website, you can see there's some known issues such as the default browser choice screen might not show up when intended, and apps requiring certain managed entitlements might not install or show an error. There's a workaround to toggle location services on and off for 10 seconds. That could fix it in the EU. There's also issues with alternate app marketplaces, but they've resolved issues such as things in the App Store and more. So there's still some issues going on with this. This is very typical. No software is perfect, but they'll continue to work on these. But there are quite a few resolved issues, even things with passkeys and more with podcasts. So this is great news where tapping on a podcast show from recently searched occasionally returns you to the recently searched view instead of the podcast show product page. So that was resolved. Lots of other things that are great to see them giving so much information, and I'll link that in the description. As far as connectivity with AirPods, well, running the beta with the AirPods Pro 2, I've had no issues. However, with my AirPods Max today on the latest version of macOS 14.4, I couldn't get them to connect properly. I just put them away and stopped using them because they just wouldn't connect as you would want them to. So there's definitely some issues. Maybe this week we'll actually see a release of AirPods updates, hopefully for all of them and not just for the Pro 2. As far as the overall performance and heat, well, performance has been pretty good for the most part. Some people are having lockups, and if you do, it seems that you can reboot the device and it fixes it. But overall, it's smooth when using it, and some people have said it feels a little different. Sometimes it feels faster, sometimes ProMotion feels a little different. It depends who you ask what they say, but it seems very smooth to me, and I haven't had any issues. If you are experiencing that, whether it's an older phone or newer phone, I saw someone in the comments with an iPhone XS that had an issue. A reboot typically will fix that. So if you haven't rebooted your phone yet and it's still actually having that issue, definitely reboot, as it should be nice and smooth no matter what you're going into. So it seems to be fine on my iPhone 11, and again, I would check that out. As far as the overall heat, well, it is a little bit warm since I've been sharing this with you, and it's not overly hot, but it seems like there's a lot to process in the background this time around, where it could take more than a few days, maybe a whole week, as it seems to be doing things you wouldn't expect, which could cause issues with battery drain. But first, let's take a look at the overall heat on the device. Now, both phones here have iOS 17.4, but the one on the right is the one I've been showing you throughout the video, and it's about 96.5 degrees Fahrenheit, and on the left, since we haven't been using it at idle, it's at about 89 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, on the right, we're at about 35.5 degrees Celsius, and on the other phone, 32.3 degrees Celsius. So overall, they're doing just fine, but in general, it's probably a little bit warmer than some people would like. I wouldn't worry about it. I really think it's processing a lot in the background. Now, as far as battery life, let's go ahead and take a look at the overall battery cycle count. I really wish they'd bring this same interface to the older phones as well, but under battery health, you'll see I'm at 127 cycles and 100% capacity. You can see Coconut Battery here on the left, which was just updated to support iOS 17.4. And as far as my overall battery life, well, it is getting me through most of the day, but you'll see I'm down to 23% right now. It says I've only had 2 hours and 24 minutes of screen active time, 5 hours and 31 minutes of screen idle time. The day before was 2 hours and 24 minutes, so it hasn't been great, although I used my iPad a lot in the past couple days. However, Cameron sent in his battery life as well. On Cameron's iPhone 15 Pro Max, you'll see he had 4 hours and 20 minutes of screen active time, 3 hours and 31 minutes of screen idle time, and he's down to 47%. He has about 97% battery health left. So overall, his is easily getting him through a day. Something's using a lot of my power again, so I'll have to look into that. Now, as far as battery goes compared to what you said, in the YouTube community poll, I took all of the comments, anything that mentioned battery, and if it was the same or better than iOS 17.3.1, I kind of marked that down and did the same with anything that was worse. 64% of you said that iOS 17.4 was the same or better than iOS 17.3.1 or whatever you were using before. 36% said it was worse. So I would say that's a pretty good number. That seems to be pretty average. I thought it was going to be more close to 50-50, but it looks like it's much better for most people. So if you're wondering if you should install iOS 17.4, I would highly recommend it for the security updates. And then of course you'll gain all of the features, and especially in the EU, you'll get third-party app stores, additional apps, and more. Now, as far as benchmarks, I did run this before the video, before the phone was even warm at all, and I scored 2,902 for single core, 7,217 for multi-core. I've seen it much higher by people that commented online, and the other day it was a little bit lower. So we've improved a little bit compared to the other day on iOS 17.4. In general, I think it's a pretty solid update for performance and don't really see a whole lot of issues as far as that goes. Now, as far as what you had to say, let's take a look at some of the comments. Echo the Fox 1 said, iOS 17.4 really killed the smoothness of my XS Max. Every animation stutters, and if I try to load anything through Safari or even Twitter, it'll take a little bit longer than normal to load. My battery health is 84%. I have near gigabit internet, so I don't know what's going on. And this is one of the comments I was talking about. I would highly recommend you reboot your device. Michael GB1MR said, hey Aaron, I have an iPhone 15 Pro Max running 17.4 and everything is running smooth, no issues at all, even scored the highest benchmarks I've ever got on a phone. I sent you a screenshot of the benchmarks. Shadow Mahesh 6173 said, I'm running iOS 17.4 on an iPhone 13 Pro Max. Good experience for gaming like PUBG Mobile. Old version 17.3 issue is screen freezing. Best version is iOS 16.6, my iPhone 13 Pro Max for gaming. Maybe iOS 17.5 or 17.6 is best experience overall. Ryan1415 says, I'm on iOS 17.4 on my iPhone 14 Pro. It has been very smooth, but there is one problem. In the control center, the home controls do not work sometimes, but everywhere else it does. I hope this gets fixed soon. Technology Geek 862 said, 13 Pro Max. Battery seems to be running a little bit faster, and phone sometimes warmer than before, even when not using. Still lasts more than a day, but ending a day with 10% less than before. JB Vu says, battery is amazing after updating on iPhone 15 Pro. Squirrel28 says, I work for a large German company. We have over 600 users who use an iPad 7. Since the update from iPadOS 17.3.1 to 17.4, the QR code recognition of the camera no longer works. However, the problem is not on iPad 8, 9, or 10. Ticket at Apple is created for this purpose, so if you want to scan QR codes with the iPad 7, you should not perform the update. So that's everything with iOS 17.4. It's a pretty big update, at least this late in the year, and iOS 18 hopefully will bring some major changes. Now, if you've found any other features I haven't mentioned in the What's New video or this video, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, and of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.